Throughout the 20th century, human beings have found many ways to record sound, for pleasure, for business, or for posterity. The surviving recordings of the last 150 years or so contain a wealth of information and value, from famous voices speaking at pivotal moments of history to the reminiscence of ordinary folk. The sounds of wildlife from exotic and faraway places, or those hedgerows and valleys now lost to the modern age. The songs of children in their first school play, to the international artists premiering classical masterpieces. The sounds of industry driven by steam, and those factories which now stand empty or redeveloped into residential places, existing now only on sound carriers. Many archives, museums and libraries around the UK hold these collections, donated in good faith and placed safely in storage. Many individuals also have private collections, projects they've been involved with, results of their working lives, or the product of a beloved hobby. So what's the problem? Sound items are under threat, both from physical degradation and as the means of playing them disappear from production. Professional consensus internationally is that time is running out to save many of our sound collections. There is an urgent need to preserve as much as possible in the next decade before they become unreadable and are effectively lost. Do you remember open reel tape? Have you got old vinyl discs lying around at home? Have you ever rolled your eyes when a teenager asks what a cassette tape is? Were you very proud of your brand new mini disc player, which was going to outlive those pesky CDs? Then you understand the first set of problems facing sound archives. Unlike books and paper, you need equipment to access what is on a cassette, reel, or disc. As these formats came into and out of use, manufacturers have ceased making the playback equipment. You might still get a cassette player at Argos, but the high-quality professional-grade equipment that you need to play and make copies of these items are becoming incredibly rare. When this project began in 2018, a good quality open reel machine cost about £400. Now they are the price of a small car. When one fails, it is taken apart to make spares for other machines, so they get rarer and rarer before they will vanish completely. The other thing you need to access the contents of sound archives are skills. The technical experts who know how to handle these items, how to play them, and how to repair the playback equipment are becoming rarer and rarer. The British Library are constantly trying to recruit trainees to become audio maintenance engineers, but they struggle to find anyone who wants to do it, and their experts are nearing retirement age. Anyone who has owned a CD will be aware of the other big problem with sound carriers. They're physically fragile. All sound carriers degrade. They get old, damaged, dusty and dirty, and some, like CDs, will suddenly stop working with no warning, and your content is irretrievably lost. This might not matter if it's Dua Lipa's latest chart hit, which is widely available, but if it's the only copy of personal testimony about experiences of life in France during World War I, it matters a lot. A further issue is that sound archives are often very poorly labelled. We have found the vast majority will have two words on them. One is usually tape or interview, or perhaps there's a number corresponding to a long-lost inventory. Finding out what's on the items takes specialist equipment, knowledge, conservation, and time. A survey compiled by the British Library before the start of this project showed that the majority of institutions questioned didn't feel confident dealing with their sound archives and had no way to access their contents, essentially meaning that the contents was already lost to the public. So what's the answer? A sustainable solution has been found. If we make high-quality, archival-grade digital copies of sound archives, we can maintain those for future generations and make them more accessible. The Unlocking Our Sound Heritage project, nicknamed UOSH for short, part of the Save Our Sounds programme at the British Library, aims to preserve and provide access to thousands of the UK's rare and unique sound recordings. The project has been running over 3 years all across the UK. The National Lottery Heritage Fund provided funding to set up 10 regional hubs, including the East of England hub at Norfolk Record Office. Our collecting area covers from Essex in the south to Grimsby in the north, from Hatfield in the west to Lowestoft in the east. Before the project started, a survey was sent out to individuals and institutions across the region, asking what urgently needed preserving. to assess what would be on our priority A-list. Our A-list contained 5,000 items from lacquer discs to mini discs, and it was our job to preserve them. They say it takes a village to raise a child, and it is also true of preserving sound archives. The project originally consisted of a project manager, a cataloguing manager, an audio digitisation engineer, an outreach officer and a copyright officer. The team has blossomed with 4 extra team members joining us to tackle cataloguing. We were also assisted by a veritable army of volunteers, 100 in all across the 3 years, who helped us with first listen cataloguing, research, blog writing and podcasting. The huge amount of time and effort it takes to identify sound recordings, from news broadcasts, musical performances to oral history interviews, was mammoth, and we could not have achieved our aims without the tireless efforts of our volunteers. So what were the challenges? Some of the sound archives preserved in this project were already safely housed at Norfolk Record Office in a specially designated tape store, meticulously catalogued by the Norfolk Sound Archive team. This meant we were able to hit the ground running. About half of our collections were housed elsewhere in the east of England, meaning our team had to hit the road to gather the collections in. Transporting archives is a delicate business. We had to ensure that hundreds of delicate, irreplaceable objects, normally kept in secure, temperature-controlled conditions, were counted, packed, and brought safely to the Norfolk strongrooms. Our cataloguing team, including our volunteers, were venturing into the unknown. From opening unmarked boxes, removing dead spiders and dust aplenty, to trying to decipher tiny labels hand-scrawled over 30 years ago. Some of our favourite items were a cassette tape with no box, mysteriously labelled potatoes, or an open reel tape labelled only pig cheer, both interestingly from Lincolnshire. All of the collections had to be sorted, packaged in archival grade boxes and numbered before our engineer got to look at them. The UWASH project was incredibly lucky to have music producer David Pye as our audio digitisation engineer. His 20 years of experience in the music industry began with handling open reel magnetic tape, and his knowledge was invaluable. David checked the condition of each individual item to make sure they were fit for playback. Common problems were broken cassette housings, unsafe splits in magnetic tape, and tape degrading so that the layers separated, or they suffered from sticky shed syndrome, leaving sticky residue on the playback heads. David used a domestic-grade fruit dehumidifier to treat the sticky tapes, baking them for hours to make them playable. This repair is a temporary fix, and every playthrough of these items could have caused catastrophic failure. The aim of the UWASH project was to create accurate copies of the original sound archives without trying to improve or correct the recordings. Some post-transfer editing was required to get rid of blank bits of recordings, but largely they are just as we found them. The hard work of creating a useful catalogue for the British Library then began. Our brave volunteers went first, listening to material where we had little or no information, noting down what was happening in each digital file to give us a starting point for our descriptions. This was a massive help for us. There is a general professional estimate that to catalogue an oral history interview, it will take you 2.5 times the length of the interview. So, for example, a 45-minute interview would take around 2 hours. If each cassette had 2 interviews on, and we've got 5,000 items, that would end up being around 65 hours a week of solid cataloguing for 3 years. With one cataloguer working 4 days a week at the start of the project, we quickly realised we needed more hands on deck. The cataloguing the British Library were asking us to do was also extremely complicated. Each item needed the engineer to record metadata about the digital transfer process, from the serial numbers on the playback machines to the cables connecting the equipment. The cataloguers had to create 3 spreadsheets for each collection, detailing the length, subject and date of recordings, down to the names of every individual speaking or playing an instrument. Each entry had to be in a standardised format to be machine readable, and was mind-bendingly specific, including where to put commas and full stops. I once had to create a speaker entry for Father Christmas. The the format was hotly debated on our project website. We came up with Nicholas, Saint, full stop, pipe, B, open bracket, speaker, mail, close bracket, pipe, D, Christmas present, delivery manager. Once the spreadsheets were completed and checked by the British Library staff, we had to upload our digital files to the digital preservation system. Then we had to build each file into a submission information package, or SIP, containing our engineers' metadata, our catalogue data, the time codes of where the recording sat on each digital file. All of this had to be quality checked and ingested before we finished. With training and guidance from the BL, we worked out the most efficient way to catalogue, but the time-consuming nature of the work demonstrated that this could not be done by regular archive staff, who were already busy running the day-to-day of the archive centre. Our biggest challenge was yet to come. In February 2020, we were hit by the pandemic. After a week of frantic preparations, photographing archives and building home office desks, we were able to continue most of our cataloguing work, but our engineers' work had to halt until lockdown eased. The Lottery Fund were very understanding, adjusting our targets to reflect that we were unable to do as much as we had planned, and allowing us to repurpose our targets from in-person to online events. One of the difficult aspects of the project is that making sound archives available is severely restricted by copyright and data protection laws. Every sound recording we dealt with has rights embedded in it, in the same way that you cannot go around making copies of Ed Sheeran's albums and making them available on the internet without getting some phone calls from his lawyers. Every oral history interview, radio broadcast, musical performance and Penguin Colony soundtrack have rights embedded in them. Unlike a lot of archive material, the sound recordings are new enough not to be out of copyright. Consequently, to make them freely available to the public, especially online, we had to examine each recording in detail. We had to trace and ask permission of every speaker on every recording, or show evidence that we had tried to find them and failed. Our target was to reach 500 recordings cleared, but we smashed that, ending on 819. An important and exciting part of UOSH was taking our preserved sound archives out of the record office and getting people to join in. 342 people attended 22 engagement events, including history walks for the visually impaired, creative writing in a replica Antarctic research hut. We made vintage phones where you can dial the past and help those with mental health challenges to engage with our material. We helped school children understand the science of sound and how an orchestra works. We made lockdown videos on mindfulness, nature sounds and Foley sound effects, and you can see from the slides how much fun we had doing it. So how did we do? February 2022 saw our final ingest to the British Library. In the end, we digitised 4,389 sound archives, including lacquer discs, cassette tapes, reel-to-reel tapes, stat tapes, CDs and mini-discs. In total, we preserved and catalogued 6,203 recordings, from oral history interviews to nuclear disarmament conferences, to the sound of cranes lifting derailed trains. We traced the right holders in 819 recordings and asked permission to make them available for free online. So what does this mean for the future? The British Library will be releasing their new Sounds website in May. Here you will be able to listen to the material preserved and cleared by the UOSH team, not just from the east of England, but from the other hubs in the UK. The Norfolk Record Office material is currently being uploaded to our online catalogue. You will be able to search the collections and come into the search room and listen at a dedicated terminal. Just email in to make an appointment. UOSH also have our highlights uploaded to the Norfolk Record Office YouTube and SoundCloud channels if you want to hear more. At the end of March, we will be drawing the shutters on the UOSH project, but this is not the end. In fact, it's just the beginning. We are leaving Norfolk Record Office with a state-of-the-art sound archive digital transfer studio, which will be taking on new work. We have passed on our knowledge and lessons learned so that more sound archives can be preserved for the future. We also hope that through the project the profile of sound archives is higher and that more professionals and individuals will become aware of the challenges and the time pressures facing sound archives and act now before it's too late. And now, our cataloguing and engagement manager, Nicole Hudson, will take you through some of the highlights of the project.
Testing 1, 2, 1, 2.
Hey, you've got to call my voice in there?
Yes. Yes, well, you can't remember what a person says.
Testing. 1, 2, 3, testing.
We can't talk about UOSH at Norfolk Record Office without starting with the collection MC3309, The Records of Patricia Daniels, which was the first collection to be preserved and catalogued. The collection consists of over 100 compact cassette tapes, as well as open reel tapes, of oral history interviews which were recorded in the 1980s by the Norwich Oral History Archive, who were based at the Norwich Community Workshop, of which Patricia Daniels was an employee and later trustee. Fondly called the King Street Collection amongst the UOSH team, it documents the social history of Norwich's King Street and its surrounding area, whisking us back in time to the turn of the 20th century and carrying us through the subsequent decades in the words of those who lived there. The collection includes memories of prominent local industries such as breweries and shoe factories, to the shops and businesses that line the street, which, according to one interviewee, included 47 public houses in King Street alone. The collection shares first-hand experiences of historic events, including the Great Floods of 1912 and the First and Second World War. But predominantly, the collection shares anecdotes of everyday life that give us an insight into the past and often feel a world away from the modern-day Norwich that we know today. From domestic life in houses within communal yards with shared outdoor sanitation facilities, to memories of herds of cattle being walked through the city centre streets on the way to a weekly cattle market, or the trams that would trundle up and down between Trouse and the city centre.
When first I come from Bungay town, they called I the Bungay Raja. They asked I o'er and o'er again if I would be a soldier. They asked I o'er and o'er again if I would take a shilling. God bless it, I'll have a try to show that I be willing. With a faller holiday, a faller holiday till I get home.
And then there was what was called the seed shop. I used to love going in there and put my hand in the sacks of corn. There'd be, see, people kept rabbits, people kept pigeons, and there'd be all the pigeon feed and that. And dog biscuits, now great big dog biscuits. Now every Monday my mother used to have to walk to the post office, the general post office where the Anglia television is now, and get her pension. And she'd always take our old dog Toby with her. But when she got as far as Peter Pimentic church, she would put a penny in Toby's mouth, she'd give him a penny, and he used to run all the way to the seed shop. And he'd put his paws on the counter, the man would take the penny out and he'd give him a dog biscuit. And that was his treat every Monday.
Did you used to go bullock warping?
Yes, on a Saturday you'd help these men to drive them out the railway at Trouse, up Brackendale, down King Street, and many's the time they'd run up the yards. I can recall a big-sized bullock walking into my father's shop, and they come in and hit it with a stick. He said, "Don't hit it, you fool. It'll turn its behind round and knock the counter down. Let it go steady, down 2 steps, through a hall, down another step into our living room, out through the kitchen into the backyard and back up the yard into King Street." Truthfully, them animals would do that.
I remember the cattle on down there, and many times we sat there having our dinner, and my grandma would say, "One of you better go in the shop," because we would go in the shop, and the cows, the cow or bullocks down there eating the greens. They used to come in the shop anyhow.
The collections that we have worked with have audibly transported us both back in time and around the world. Most prominently, in terms of geography, we were carried across the globe to the Antarctic Peninsula via sound recordings held by the British Antarctic Survey. The British Antarctic Survey, the United Kingdom's National Polar Research Institute, hold archives at their UK base in Cambridge, and through UOSH, their sound archives were digitally preserved at Norfolk Record Office. The collection of scientific, administrative and operational records includes wonderful examples of wildlife recordings, otherworldly scientific recordings of electromagnetic frequencies, as well as snapshots into experiences of researchers who have lived and worked in Antarctica over the decades.
The King Penguin Rookery at the Bear Isles, 21st of December 1961. Most of the grunting noises you can hear are the penguins protesting about their neighbours. The display calls are quite characteristic, and behind it all is the constant background of the tweeting of the chicks, or the whistling of the chicks. That was a very nice display call from an adult.
As already mentioned, sound archives can transport us back in time to significant moments in history. They document historic events on a personal and individual level, capturing the experiences of everyday people, like this next sound recording, in which the interviewee shares his childhood memories of celebrating Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee in 1897.
And I'll tell you what we had on Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. We had a tea party in the school. All the children in I suppose that was all over the country, I suppose. They got tea parties up for them in the schoolrooms. And I think we were all issued with a mug with a Queen's photo on the side.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
See? Diamond Jubilee, 60 years reign. Yeah? We never had anything like that at home, what we had there. Cool, do you want any more? They didn't ask your tongue whether you wanted any more. Jellies and all sorts and all good fruit. And, no, you had a real set of cakes.
So that was a real treat.
Oh, bro, yes. We used to look forward to anything like that.
Across many of the collections that have been preserved at Norfolk Record Office through UOSH, memories of the First and Second World War provide us with perspectives of Norfolk residents, from what it was like on the home front to experiences of Norfolk servicemen fighting abroad. In this next set of clips, we will hear memories from the First World War, including memories of supply shortages, the experiences of fishermen who continued to work the East Anglian coastline through the conflict, and a childhood memory of seeing an airship for the first time.
I got married during the war. We weren't allowed any materials. That was the last year of the war, 1918, and we were married in April, and that was when things were really sticky. There was very little sugar and no dried fruit whatever, and to buy an orange was an impossibility. And bananas, we hadn't seen any bananas at all from early on in the war. Foreign fruit, we only had English apples and English plums. 2 years there was a good supply, the next and two years there was a poor supply. It all depended on the weather. Yeah. So of course we had no wedding cake. We'd come back to my sister-in-law's house and we just had a cup of tea and sandwiches. We could get a little bit of bacon to boil, and our speciality was shortbread. The young lady, she was a baker in a small shop just on the corner, and she made us some special shortbread, which wasn't allowed because it took so much fat. And butter and margarine, everything like that was all strictly rationed.
We were steaming away and we left the Norfolk or the Esbo lightship, and it was blowing hard, very hard, and snowing like Billy O from the southeast. I then come off watch after we left the Esbo lightship, and I turned in, and I must have been asleep. All at once I had a shot, I'd like to say, you know, well, that, because that woke me up. So I could come out of the cab and got aft. And I said to the skipper, I said, where are you? He said, I don't know. He said, I don't know if we're on a sandbank or if we're on the mainland or where we are. See, no lights, that's wartime. No lights or nothing. And after a little while, we threw up our flares, put the flares up, we couldn't. After about 3/4 of an hour, half an hour, we see a little white light into the westward on us. Just a small light, anyone with a lantern light, but a long way, because that was it's about 3 miles nearly. We see them, and away come, they fired a rocket apparatus out there. Eventually they got us ashore, like. Well, they told us there was a big army barrack camp, like, just off Starfleet, and they'd call the army out thinking that was the blooming Germans had landed. They did, yes, they told us afterward. They were all called out armed with rifles and that and everything and that, and they had trenches along inland off there, don't they? That's why they never showed us no light or nothing, see, not for you. And they got us ashore all right, and I went on, we come home, eventually we come home.
Some of the kids one dinner time, after school, after dinner, one of them come up, Coleridge said, there's an airship going over the brickfield. So of course that was in the days before the First War. An airship was something we'd never seen. So we all tore off down to this brickfield, instead of going into school, to see this airship. When we got back, the old schoolmaster was waiting at the gate. He said, fall in, too deep. So we fell in. He said, no, he said, bring them in. He said, and he gave us a cane on each hand, and he said, you can write 200 lines, he said, after school. I must not run after airships instead of coming to school. Well, don't you think that man, knowing the situation at that time, would have been more to the point if he'd said, right, fall in and then march us all down and explain
absolutely.
Absolutely. That's the sort of thing, you see.
Moving forward to the Second World War, we will now hear memories from Great Yarmouth from the collection of the Time and Tide Museum. In these interview extracts, we hear anecdotes of the war through the innocence of youth, from air raids to the Home Guard, and how a school marked victory in Europe in May 1945.
I can remember walking down Belfort Place, which was down beside the silk factory where Sainsbury's now stand, and a little old lady standing at a cottage door sort of said, hello, what are you going to do when the bombs drop? And I said, oh, my dad has had a word with Hitler and he's not going to bomb Yarmouth. So I was talking about the innocence of youth.
My brother Bob, he was in the Home Guard, I suppose about 16 or 17, I don't know what age he was at me. And I remember he must have been in the Home Guard when there was a threat of invasion, because I remember about 1 o'clock in the morning there was a tremendous banging on the door, our old house. And my mother said, who on earth is that? And she showed out the window, she said, who on earth is that? And this voice said, this is Corporal Fuller, because he lived down the street. He said, Corporal Fuller, tell Bob to get up, the Germans are landed. And she shouted back, he can't do it, he can't get up, he got to get up for work at 5 o'clock in the morning. But talking about the Home Guard, they had this fight on a thing called Thompson's Meadow at Norden. And the Home Guard, they had what they called a spigot mortar. They were a great big thing, a spigot mortar. And it fired a great big charge. It was a massive sort of shell charge, what you'd like to call it. And these things, they used to mount them on a special stand. Anything that came along the road, they used to sort of blast away at. Well, the Home Guard decided to give us a demonstration of how they worked. And they had this sort of target, I think it was an old oil drum or something, out in the other side of the field. It's still amusing me, this incident. And they decided, they set the spigot mortar up on the mount, you see. There was a couple of real characters mounting this gun. They pulled the trigger and the blast went off, this spigot mortar swung round, and this charge went hurtling across the fields and demolished about 3 chicken runs. Went straight through 3 chicken sheds, and there was chickens everywhere flying about, live ones, dead ones, and I remember we had a roast chicken for dinner the next day.
And I can remember, I think, VE night.
Yes.
They sort of said it, I think they were expecting it, when we left school, if VE as victory in Europe was declared, you wouldn't need to do your homework tonight, and it was, and we didn't.
While many of the sound recordings that we've worked with at Norfolk Record Office have been oral history interviews, we have preserved a variety of other types of sound recordings. This includes collections of music, from liturgical music from services held at Norwich Cathedral, to performances staged at the Aldborough Festival from the Brit and Peers archive in Suffolk. In this next clip, we will hear an extract from the Song of Hiawatha by composer Samuel Coleridge Taylor from the archives of Norfolk Record Office. Having worked with audio collections from coastal regions of Norfolk, Suffolk and Grimsby, we have also preserved recordings of traditional songs sung by fishermen, like that of this next clip, which is an extract from an interview with Frederick Knights, a Lowestoft fisherman born in 1886.
Yes, on the 14th of February we sailed from the land in the boat trawler Leslie bound for the North Sand. There was 5 brave old seamen with the ship's company from the eastward and the northward to the northward steered we. After we had been fishing for 7 or 8 days, the skipper said, "Stop the gear, boys, and we'll go away. Come up on the deck, my boys, and your topsail take down, for it won't be very long before we're in Lowestoft town."
As the East of England UOSH hub, we have worked with many sound recordings that showcase regional accents and traditional dialects. We will conclude this section of the talk with an extract from an interview with a Norfolk farmer, from sound recordings created and collected by Gresson Hall Rural Life Museum and Farm. This recording has provided us with many fantastic stories and anecdotes from the speaker Jimmy's working life, along with traditional Norfolk dialect words such as mawkin, meaning scarecrow. In this clip, we will hear him tell a story about a farm worker's home-brewed beer.
Years ago, nearly everybody used to brew their own beer. Well, we had an old fellow worked on the farm. His wife could brew real good beer. And he wasn't a very popular old fellow. He never give any away, and nobody liked him much. Well, one morning I was up at the back of the wagon, and I see him a-coming there, another old fella to work. He got his old frail baskets I had on the back, and a half-a-gallon bottle slung in the front on him, home-brewed. That's what he used to bring to work every day. Well, when he got up to the wagon lodge, he said to this other old bloke, "Hold you on a minute," he said, "I shan't want this beer up the field today. I got some from yesterday. That was cold, and I didn't drink it all, so I'll put her in here." So he climbed up here in an old wagon we didn't use much, stood her up the corner, and covered her up with an old sack. He didn't know I see him. Well, that got out right hot during the day, and I was walking about among the yards, and there was a young feller, a yardman there. I say to him during that afternoon, "Oh, Yanni, are you dry?" "Ah, I think of him," he say. I say, "Would you like a nice draught of beer?" "Well, yes, there I would," he say. I say, "Come you along me then." I went up it, climbed it, this old wagon, and I got the bottle out. I say, "Hey, you're a good pull." So he had a good pull of this here bottle. So did I. God, I said, "It was a drop of good stuff, wasn't he?" So I didn't know you brewed beer. I said, "I don't." He said, "Whose is it then?" And I told him. God, my hat, he cheated. He said, "God," he said, "he'll kill us if we know we've been out of his beer." Oh, I say, "You don't know. What you got to do then?" I said, "I'll tell you what I'll do." I took the old bottle down to the pit, the horse pit. I didn't roil the water up. I dropped the old bottle in, and I filled her up with water out of the horse pit. Oh, he say, "He'll know." I said, "I don't think it will. We'll see." So I put her back into the wagon, and I just laid the cork on the top and covered it up again. I say, "We'll see when he come up tonight." So we got her back to the cottage or the wagon lodge. Why he come, he say, "Wait a minute," he say, "I'll have a draught of beer before I go home." He say to this other bloke what along with him. So he climbed up into the wagon. Soon as I turned up the door, he began to swear. "I knew that'd happen." He say, "What? God damn it," he said, "I should have tied that cork in there. That was a new brew, and swilking her up here all the way this morning, that there cork blew out. All that shilling's gone flat." He got her out, He got up his mouth and guggle, he was going. He slipped about 1.5 pints on into him. He said, "Oh, do you want any?" He said, "No, thank you." He said, "I don't want any." He said, "That is gone flat as anything." Still, never mind, he said, "You know, there's no bad beer. Some is better than others." He never did find out that we'd filled it up out of the hospital. A good job he did. I know we shouldn't have done it, but there you are.